Welcome to the Japan-Africa Space Business Network, powered by Jafrique Media, one of the leading African media stations in Tokyo, where we promote space startup activities in Japan and Africa. In this episode, our host, Boitumelo Mokoka, a PhD student in international finance, sits with Mr. Meshack Ndiritu, President of Omarichet Space. Join us as we unravel the mysteries, explore the latest trends in Japan and Africa's private space sectors. Okay. All right. So I would just like to first try to introduce myself. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Boitumelo Mokoka. I'm from the Japan-Africa Space Business Network, which is basically affiliated with Jafrique Media. And this is one of the leading African media stations here in Tokyo, Japan. And our aim is basically to promote space business activities in both Africa and Japan. So I would also like to thank you so much for finally joining us. You are basically our first guest on the JASBN show, so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And if I can introduce myself, my name is Meshack. I'm here because of the association with Omarichet. So Omarichet Space is a space-based company. It's focusing on satellite communication as well as space launches. But the launches that we're providing is on offering commercial spaceport, which are modeled around PPP arrangement. So I'm the president. It was actually founded on the basis of a training that I attended there in Japan, which was on satellite engineering. Those days it used to be called CANSAT, but it's now evolving to be HEPTA-SAT. And out of that aspirations, I really came to learn that not so many people are privileged to be, to have that hands-on experience with the engineering component. And the first, I think the first thought of it was to provide hands-on experiences to engineers back in Kenya, but the mission has been changing over time because we found a business along the way. So we started off with a kit called Edusats, which is basically a reverse engineered model of our new CubeSat, and it allows people to build. It's a test bench, basically allowing people to build from component level to fully assembled CubeSat.
Wow, I'm really glad to hear that you were very inspired by your experience with a project here in Japan. And actually, I'm very interested to know more about how you like the background that you have and how your academic background helped you to succeed in your current role as the president and one of the co-founders.
It's a good question. So I started off from astrophysics and astronomy background. That was my bachelor's. Then I went up to do space systems. Okay, but my project at bachelor's level was on Earth observation. So you can actually imagine transitioning from astronomy, astrophysics, doing a project term on Earth observation, and basically applying image processing, but mixing up with some data processing and all that. And then I felt that was not good enough. So I really needed to strengthen my engineering skill sets as well as hands-on experience. So I went on to do space systems and covering the entire space ecosystem from the ground systems to the space segment to the satellite subsystems. The only part I didn't cover during that master program was on the downstream because I had done projects on the downstream. Yeah, and along the way, taking some small courses on satellite engineering, things that build up my engineering skills, because I believe, well, as someone said, I think in order for you to be able to lead a technical team, you have to be well versed with the technical details of it in order to be able, to guide the staffs or people who work under you to implement some program. I think they need some kind of motivation in some sense. And that's what motivated me to really go all out and have more skills to not only for the sake of certificates, but to really hammer into the future where I want to build systems themselves.
Wow, I'm really impressed by that. And that will actually lead us to our next question about your vision for the future. How does Omarichet actually, the mission for Omarichet, how do they align with your expertise and the vision for the future of the space industry?
So as you know, as an African continent, there's a lot of disparity in terms of there's a lot of exclusion, I can put it that way, when it comes to essential services such as communication, when it comes to things like, telehealth, telecommunication, access to space services in general. I was having discussion with colleagues and friends the other day, and I was talking about how even the GPS or GNSS signal is not very precise on the continent. And you being there in Japan, you can enjoy the precision that is existing. But when you come to the continent, even in town, in cities, you will still suffer from resolutions of about 15 meters in accuracy, which is very low. And our model, what I would put it like, our vision is to see the excluded zones, especially the peripherals and the villages, those people who are living in total exclusion, being, enrolled into the ecosystem of digital revolution that is existing. And you can have digital revolution without having the fundamental services, communication services, getting connected to the networks, having precision in terms of location services, and so on and so forth. Basically knowing your environment and being able to connect to other communities. And as you know, the villages in Africa don't enjoy that. Life seems to be okay in the cities. And every other service provider, if you look at the big telecom providers, they are going into the city. There's a flooding of the services in towns, but when you go into the villages, it's not the same. Even the telco industry doesn't want to go there to deploy their terrestrial base stations because there's no proper value of returns. And our mission came to really connect people to the network first, even before connecting them to the broadband. And that's why we are talking about cellular backhaul. Cellular backhauling is a service that allows people to use satellites as the space towers, what you would use as the base stations here on the ground, and therefore connecting, messaging, being able to communicate freely and make calls over the internet, over the satellites, as other people are enjoying. And again, coming to the precision, being able to enjoy services like e-commerce, mobility, based on the precision of the signal that you derive from legacy providers like GPS, Galileo, and others. So this is we know the pains, and I think growing in those pains also is a motivation to solve those deep problems that exist on the continent. It's a unique continent. Yes, we appreciate that others are going through, to some magnitude, not the same, but some level of challenges, but not as the African continent is going through. And we need to solve them with using local means.
Yeah, and I can just imagine you are probably one of the pioneers in this field. So you definitely have met some of the challenges trying to venture into connecting the disconnected. What are one of those challenges that Omarichet has actually faced in trying to do that?
Yeah, there are mainly two. The technical resolve is not the issue here, because we figure out the technical requirements and all the systems that need to go in place to provide a service, but it narrows down to two things: regulatory barriers that exist, which is true in most of the countries, not only Africa, but Africa it's unique in its own terrain. And the other one is about financial access. I think I would say that when it comes to investment, the African continent is not well represented. If you look at how even providers like big lenders in multinational banks, they really put a risk factor on the continent, which to me doesn't really apply. Yes, there's some level of risk, but those risk factors, chase away investors because they don't have the confidence to invest on the continent. But in my view, this is not uniform everywhere, and there needs to be a lot of consideration. And I believe this is where we can find good nexus with Japan, because they have evolved, since World War, and they have developed their own trust. They have built their own communities. I believe, that development trend and that pathway can be a good learning zone for the continent in terms of unlocking the potentials of big techs. Because the investment we have been seeing is really tackling the symptoms instead of the real issues, which are like enabling the continent to have capabilities in technology. It hasn't happened for some reasons, and this is where we need to have this conversation to have a mutual understanding with. And Japan is a good friend of Africa. I think JICA has been very instrumental in development of projects which they have some level of technologies, and going by the virtue that also Japan is a pro-tech country. They have pioneered different technologies that continue to make a lot of difference. I think this is the nexus that we can find in the collaboration that can come out of this.
Absolutely. And have you ever thought of any private companies that you'd like to partner with here in Japan?
We have identified a few of them. I tried to see if I can remember them off my head, but I think Mitsubishi Heavy was one of them. The good thing with Mitsubishi Heavy is that they venture into they're not into the traditional domain, just making of motor cars or motor vehicles, but they are very good supporters of JAXA in the space technology and systems. And I believe this could be one of the ways we can find ways of collaborating. There's Japan Space Systems, which is a long-standing initiative or organization as well, which is a potential in our collaboration. There's a lot of there are a lot of companies in Japan that continue to also produce components and subsystems that go into the main satellite, which partnership is not only about building things together, but about it's not just providing funding, it's not just making a system, but going into the details of components, going to the details of having a conversation that allows for custom-made components or designs that make your satellite really unique. I think those are the collaborations we are looking for.
Okay, that's actually very interesting. And regarding these investment opportunities, especially those companies that are specifically just interested in like the financial part, are you interested in seeking these investments from Japanese investors?
Oh yeah, precisely. We are running on a budget. Our simulation actually shows that if we want to cover the entire continent, our budget simulation is going in the upwards of $400 million. And there's no way we can raise that by ourselves. We definitely need to bring like-minded people together. We definitely need to also look into the areas of strong banks that have understood the tech ecosystem, which will, facilitate things like debt financing and moving forward into other, series of raising funding. So we are really interested in the financial investment that would come out of Japan.
Wow, really interesting. And I'm really glad to be in the position of actually representing JASBN. So do you have any specific promotional activities that you would think that we as JASBN could actually help Omarichet in terms of promoting you to the Japanese market?
Oh yeah, perfectly. A platform like this will help us to raise, the awareness of what is existing on the continent. Many people believe that Africa is a continuous user, but not a producer, which is basically not true. Things are changing, and raising this awareness will also reduce that barrier of risk factor when it comes to investment on the continent. So creating a platform, like, having regular conversations like this. The other thing is publications. And when you have trade fairs or any events that can allow our participation, probably exhibition, that would be a very good, collaboration. And sometimes hosting our engineers for different types of trainings would be welcome. You have a legacy in terms of training engineers, which I'm a beneficiary of. So I know that this can help us to leapfrog in terms of development.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much for adding that input. Omarichet is one of the, I would say, the leading technology and telecommunication startups in Africa. And I've also found out that it does have presence in both in Kenya, Namibia, Botswana, where I come from, and other African countries. And we really do hope to see more expansion on the African continent. We do hope to see it actually having more presence here in Japan, especially. And we would really love to really work with Omarichet and other in more of your projects, especially here in terms of collaborating with Japanese startups as well as other investors to just bring that African hope to light, as well as connecting the disconnected. So, Mr. Meshack, once again, it was such a profound opportunity to have you on our platform. And we really want to continue to keep in touch with you. So thank you so much for joining us today.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time and for the audience. We are happy to walk the journey together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. I hope you have a wonderful, beautiful evening.
You too. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.